Episode number 4 with men's fashion guru, Sid Mashburn. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Sid Mashburn. Sid is the founder, co-owner of Sid Mashburn and Mashburn, both clothing stores, men and women respectively. Today they have about 11 stores, 135 employees, and continue to expand every year. Sid has recently been named, both by Esquire and GQ magazine, as one of the best menswear shops in America. Sid, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
When you hear that you've been named one of the best menswear shops in America, not Atlanta, not the South, but the entire country, how does that feel?
Fantastic. I mean, it really is a testimony to a lot of years of hard work and having the right people in place that came alongside of us to help us do what we wanted to do, which really kind of our thesis is how do we, or one of our theses is that how do we really connect with people and share with people? Because everybody that we run into out there is looking for a connection. And sometimes it's as cliche as that Cheers song. You know, you want to go to a place where everybody knows your name, and that's true. So we've been fortunate to really get a lot of people that work with us that feel the same way. So when you walk into our stores, hopefully it feels like you're walking into someone's home. And in this case, hopefully Ann's and mine and the people that work for us, our home. And hopefully we will treat you accordingly. So one of the first things we do is we try to hug them with our eyes, because sometimes we can't quite get to them. But we really do want to connect. We offer them a cold drink or a hot drink, whether it's a water or a Coke or a beer or coffee or tea or whatever, just something to say, welcome to our place. And we don't ask them, what can we help you find today? Unless there's a sense that the person, you can kind of sense in the person that they're in a hurry. So that's when you have to have a pretty high level of EQ to go, this person's in a hurry. I got to cut to the chase. What can I do for you today? So other than that, we want to make it as the Italians say, as tranquillo as possible, so that when you walk in, you really do feel at ease and not like in a pressure environment. And that also extends to even the way we compensate the people that work for us.
Now, hang just for a second. I want to come back to all of this, the
Sure,
brand and the service. No, this is all really, really great, but I
Yeah.
want to, I guess, set the backdrop a little bit.
Thank you for stopping me.
And I apologize.
No,
because
please.
I will interrupt and don't take it personally,
No,
but it's
I
only
love it.
because I'm interested in what's going on here. Where does this ambition come from? You grew up in Mississippi. Was this something that was always a part of you? Was it influenced by your parents? What's the root of all of this?
I think that it really, you grew up in Atlanta, right?
I did.
I think the red thread that connects Atlanta to Mississippi and across the South, really that sort of arc, I would argue that maybe from Virginia down to Texas, that it's the band of hospitality. So there is something in our nature, I think, feels fairly inherent that we like to take care of people. And so I grew up in an environment where if someone was stopped on the side of the road, you stop to say, hey, you need a hand? Or if you saw someone, a neighbor in need, or anybody, you always kind of reached out to say, how can I help you up, or how can I help you out here? And so funny enough, though, my family on my mother's side they were merchants. They had a dry goods store, they had an apparel store, and they had a dry goods store, a hardware store, and an implement store, and a furniture store.
They basically had all the stores in the small town in Mississippi.
Well, and it was in different towns because they were all tiny, agricultural communities. And then my dad's parents were in the food business. They had a cafe. the DNA strain is stronger than you realize as to what, and maybe not DNA, but just sort of inherently, where do you go with your vocation? There's more of a tie to your parents and your forefathers than you realize sometimes. So I grew up in that environment.
Sports and music and clothing defined your childhood. So the sports, I get.
Yes.
The music, I think people can relate to.
Sure.
But you lost me at clothing. So what, tell me about this. What's behind
It's
clothing?
It's a great question. The just one thing is the sports, because the neighborhood was built around sports. Because as you grew up, the 9-year-old that lived across the creek from you, and the 11-year-old that lived down the street, and the 5-year-old that lived, on the cul-de-sac, everybody, you hung out in the neighborhood. So you were always playing ball or catching crawdads or something like that. So there was always this neighborly feel to all that. But I was an outlier in that group because I loved clothes. And I had an older brother who was about 11, maybe 12 years older than me. And I had two older sisters who were 9 and 13 or 14 years older than me. And they all were into clothes. And my grandmother was running this dry goods store. And so one of my sisters would work there. But my brother was always super turned out. He loved his clothes and was really into them. And, at that time also, TV was a pretty big part of life. So between watching Robert Conrad on the Wild Wild West and what was his name, the other guy, Artemis Pyle. Anyway, Sidney Poitier and To Sir with Love and In the Heat of the Night. And then also Dick Van Dyke on the Dick Van Dyke Show. Those guys I was like, those are cool dressers. My parents were into clothes too, so it just was around.
You get through college, you go to New York, and you get your first apprenticeship learning how to design. And you're going to go on to J. Crew, to Ralph Lauren, to Lands' End, to Hilfiger. I mean, you've been with every top retail and fashion brand there is. Question I have is, you specifically chose the design route. You didn't go marketing, you didn't go operations, you didn't go finance, all of which, of course, are important to building a company. Why design? What was behind that decision?
Well, first of all, Glenn, let me point out you've tapped into something that is unfortunately a misunderstood piece of the clothing business. In the clothing business, everybody thinks everything's about design, and it's not. It is about those other things you mentioned. Whether it's finance, whether it's merchandising, whether it's supply chain management. I mean, it's a business like any other business. It just happens to have a massive piece of which depends on the creative outlet. When I was 9 years old, I asked my sister to get me a pair of green pants and some beads to wear. I'm 9 years old. This is 1970. It's like I always was drawn to what could I do to my look. And so even in middle school, I had my mother tapering my pants because the pant legs were too big. So I'd say, Mom, I want to get them down tighter. And she was all game. She was a great seamstress, and so she would do that for me. And then I was also getting shirts. And my first job, actually no, not my first job. My second job was working in a men's clothing store. As soon as I got my driver's license, which, as you know, used to be a massive passage for young guys. One of the reasons I wanted to get the driver's license is so I could go work in this men's store. So I just loved the idea of taking clothes and also not just wearing them the way they came to me, but then playing with them. And so it became a little bit of an outlet for me. So, maybe this is overstating or gilding the lily, but the book Outliers, where it talks about the 10,000 times that you go through something, I'd been through a lot of wardrobe changes. I'd tried every look out there. I mean, if you see the look of my pledge class when I went to Ole Miss, I looked like the biggest fool you've ever seen. I had some outfit from GQ, and I thought it was cool, but it was so bad. So anyway, I always liked the idea of expressing that side of myself, and the nice thing is I lived in a town where everybody just was kind of like, yeah, well, that's Sid. It wasn't like it was weird or it was strange or it wasn't wasn't out of line with who I was and how I was accepted. So it was cool.
2007, you come to Atlanta and you start the now Sid Mashburn and Ann Mashburn. And let me mention that you start this when you've got a flourishing career, when you've got 5 children. Let me repeat that. That's 5 for those of you out there.
Let me correct you. Girls.
Girls, 5. Right. That's got to be a real challenge. I mean, the risk of starting something mid-career with 5 kids, I assume you had a mortgage. Walk me through that. Was that a no-brainer, or was this something that took a lot of, thinking through and planning and obviously, courage to be able to make the leap?
We talked about what it is we wanted to do, and she wanted me to go back to New York and get in a typical creative director or head of design role. And I said, I actually have another idea. And she said, well, I know the idea. It's the same one you've had since the day I met you. I said, yeah. And she struggled with it. And finally she relented and said, listen, we've been poor before. I think you're employable, so let's give it a shot. And so the idea of building a company that was really the foundation was built off of our designs and our point of view, but also used other third-party brands to augment what our conversation was going to be with the customer. So that was probably the hardest part. It wasn't hard for me, and I'm not a betting guy.
You're not a betting guy, but I've heard that you tend to be on the spectrum a little more risk-seeking than Ann would be, who's a little more risk-averse.
No question.
And it's not as if you started this when one of you had a full-time job to bring in stable income. I mean, you both pretty much were going for it, right? You both started the company. I mean, this is it.
And we went all in. I mean,
you went all in.
We didn't spare expense to, we opened up a 3,000 square foot store. It wasn't like we opened up a little 600 or 800 square foot store with me and another guy. I mean, we went big.
Does going big mean that a big chunk of your savings went to this?
Yes.
Were you able to get any outside capital, or this is all
us.
self-financed?
All self-financed. And, I had pretty good confidence that we knew what the space was going to look like. And I'd also had a nice conversation with a very, very, very famous, possibly one of the most famous merchants in the country. I asked him, I said, what do you think I should do? I said, where's the white space? He said, where your heart is. Go where you think you should go. And it was a little bit of, it sounds, kind of surface and maybe a little shallow, but I was like, okay. And so we saw, to me at that time, Glenn, what I saw from growing up working in independent specialty retail and then also working for larger chain stores is that you had 2 different core competencies. The independent specialty store was a guy or a girl who knew their customer intimately and almost bought for them, but didn't know how to produce product. Okay? The chain stores and the department stores and the big companies knew how to develop product, but didn't know how to build that customer intimacy. Do you know the book Disciplines of Market Leaders?
Yes.
Okay, where it talks about, one thing's got to be the tip of your spear. We like that there are 3 tips to the spear. Not that we necessarily do it well, but we said there's a chasm there between those 2 operating models. That's where we want to go. We want to build local intimacy, but we also want to be innovative about how we develop the product and how we bring it to the customer. As I continued to sort of roll this through my mind going forward, because as I grew in my vocation, I realized I didn't want to just be a designer. Because as a designer, you basically hand off a sample to another team who then has to sell it to 2 or 3 people, and then ultimately it gets to the customer. And that's what I loved about J. Crew and Lands' End as opposed to Polo and Tommy Hilfiger. Not that those are bad models, but you had a closer relationship with the customer. You know what I'm saying? Sure. And so what I loved about growing as a designer, I was like, I want to be a retailer too. I want to have that relationship with the customer, but I want to make it for them. It's a little bit like being a chef. Okay? We're going to make this for these people, and we're going to serve it to them right then and there. It doesn't have to go through a whole nother chain before it gets to them. That way I can help. It overstates it to say I can control the experience, But it is, I control the experience.
And part of that control is the service element, which you alluded to earlier. Beyond service, in terms of the clothes themselves, because you make a lot of your clothes. So what was the gap in the marketplace that you identified in terms of fashion-wise, here's what's missing and here's where we can fill the void?
Okay, so if you go back to design, style, building an experience, well, quickly after that becomes quality. So how do we offer high quality at a great price? So after quality becomes value. How do we really tighten the quality-value relationship? My education from J. Crew, from Polo, from Tommy, from Lands' End, I learned what made a nice fabric. What's the staple length of the yarn? What's the yarn size? What's the construction of the fabric? Who's the finisher of the fabric? And what are you going to use it in? How does it behave within a particular cut of something? When I was at J. Crew, we were a super popular company. Part of that was that people overlooked was the price and the value proposition. But we always kind of thought we're playing from the Hudson River to East LA. That's our sweet spot. We were not concentrating on the East River and LA itself. We didn't want necessarily that last piece of the margin. We wanted to play to all of America. And that's something that I grew up with is how do you have a big hug and a big openness to taking care of a lot of people?
Is that driven from a business perspective, because that's where I think the market is, or more just from I want to reach out and help people on all walks of life regardless, beyond the business, but more just from a personal satisfaction and fulfillment perspective?
They play off each other. Those are first cousins. Because what's interesting about it is when we wrote the business, or I say when Ann and even Elizabeth and I helped write the business plan, the narrative included that we're not going to have a demographic. Okay, so today our youngest customer ever is 11, our oldest customer is 87. Okay, we sell Levi's jeans for $65 a pair. We sell handmade suits. We've sold one for over $10,000. Now, if you just say those two things, it sounds disparate, but when you see them in our mix and start to understand how they play together, you're like, this is cool. You're saying everybody's welcome here.
And it's a very unusual model. If you walk into Saks Fifth Avenue,
you're not going to find $65 jeans.
You're not, and if you go the opposite spectrum, you walk into Men's Warehouse, and you're not going to find the $10,000 suit. So you're trying to work across the entire spectrum.
That's exactly right. First of all, it's more democratic, it's more egalitarian, it's more populistic, but also it's more fun. And also it lessens your business exposure. Okay? So if people are not so good on the lower end and guys on the higher end have money, you're taking care of them, and vice versa. And ultimately it's about fun and being a good neighbor, because I had a guy come in the store one time who was to call him a chicken farmer is maybe a little denigrating, but he's a chicken guy. And he could have bought and sold all of our business today 10 times. He's a very well-to-do chicken farmer. And so he came into our store and there was a Brunello. Do you know Brunello Cucinelli?
Yes.
Brunello Cucinelli. I had a down vest in there, wool cashmere down.
It's very high end.
It's super high end. And I had a wool cashmere vest in there, and it was very, very expensive. And he went to turn the price tag over.
Give us a number.
It was $1,800, which for what it was for Brunello Cucinelli, it was right in their sweet spot. But when I saw him turn that price tag over, I was like, oh my goodness. My stomach turned, because I knew he was going to respond by going, a down vest is $1,800. And, between the fabric, between the quality, between the branding, everything, it worked for Cucinelli. But for us, we said, you know what, at that point, everything, we're going to pull back and make sure that everything we have is a value proposition. So the $10,000 suit, the reason it's a $10,000 suit is because the fabric, because of the make, because it's what we call tutto a mano, which is completely handmade. So every seam, every stitch on the suit is done by hand, except for the long seam on the back of the jacket and on the inseam and outseam of the trousers. Completely made by hand. So it takes a long time.
So we talked about service, we talked about quality. It's hard to convey, but I'd like to try the experience when you walk in the store. Beyond the service, which is great, You've got animals hanging out of the walls. You've got music blasting at a pretty decent volume. Tailors, you can see when you walk in, they're not hidden away in the back room or downstairs. So walk us through what you were trying to create with the store aesthetic, which is pretty unique.
If you walk in the Atlanta store in particular, it feels a little clubbish, okay? But the important thing is that we wanted to the feeling of the store, the look of it, to have a little bit of an older vibe, but also a little bit of a loose vibe to it. So even though you've got these black fixtures, it's got seagrass on the floor, which already makes it a little more casualized. And then we have a lot of Dury rugs and thrown around to kind of, and they're torn and tattered, and they have a little personality to them. And we like the taxidermy pieces, and we just put a lot of things in the store. There are a lot of books around, so it's things that are kind of touchstones for us that we enjoy. We don't really do visual merchandising per se, but one of the other things we like to expound on is that we want our shop to feel like a frat that everybody gets a bid to. Okay? This is for every man, and that we really, 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 really want to lean on the sense that anybody can be our customer. If you like what we do, anybody can shop there. And that also goes back to something I was going to say earlier. We don't pay any commission to the guys that work in our shop. They're not incented to work with a particular customer when they walk in the door. They're incented to help whoever walks through the door. Whether they need a pair of pants that they bought at Men's Warehouse, hemmed, or if they need a pair of jeans repaired, we're open to almost anything as far as helping people.
This service component, this customer intimacy, is a really critical part of this DNA. Is this something that had been percolating your whole life, and finally here it was, this is the manifestation? Has it evolved over time as you started out and you got customer feedback? Because I assume the success you have today wasn't there day one. So were there any bumps in the road to get here, figuring out, or was it, gosh, this has been so many years planning in your head and in your heart that by the time it came to fruition, everything was laid out exactly according to plan?
That's an excellent question. The social and visual aspect of the stores have been there since day one, and the way we go to market has been there. The way we run the business has changed because obviously over the course of years, you have to tighten it up, and you really have to say, you have to put some protocols in place that it's easy for other people to follow and to go along with. When we started, we had 3 people. Today we got 135 people. So you have to tighten up. And we kind of joke that we're a little bit like James Brown. We like to appear loose, but we like to be tight. So and one of the ways we did that, Glenn, which we love, and I think the company really loves, is as we grew, we had to kind of move away from the oral tradition of passing everything along by just telling guys. So we built something called a culture kit. And the culture kit really espouses what our core values are. And our core values are hopefulness and helpfulness, which is the first 2 things we found when we came to Atlanta. And the other things is humility, because, when a guy comes out of the dressing room, one of your first moves is to drop down on your knees immediately and turn his pants up so he doesn't feel or appear to look goofy, because it's an awkward moment when he comes out and his pants are turned up with big cuffs. So we want to try to make it as easy as possible for the customer. And the combination of all that leads to honor. So between laying out those core the core principles of what it is we do and like to aspire to, we're also talking there about, what is it about serving that's important? We think serving is cool. I mean, there's nothing cooler than taking care of people. Really. I mean, I know that sounds, you could probably find that in 50 books, but, like the old saying goes, is we're here to serve, not to be served. So that's paramount to us, is making sure someone feels comfortable in their own skin. Because clothes can be daunting, especially when you walk into our store the first time. You're kind of like, well, this place looks kind of serious. And you see action going on and there's movement going around, it can be a little intimidating. So we're trying to do everything we can to dial back the intimidation factor. And that's why the music's going. That's why you get a cold or a hot drink. That's why we try to make you feel, as welcome as possible so that we can dial that back.
And on that note, I've heard you say that we're essentially in the hospitality business. So you tend not to benchmark against other retailers as much as restaurants and
Yes.
hotels, I assume. Are there any particular companies, brands that you look at and you say they've got it right, and to some degree you aspire to be that same level of service and customer intimacy?
We look back at all those independent specialty stores that I kind of alluded to early on that I grew up around, because you can go into a small town and find them. Even William King up in Bristol, Tennessee, or George Bass down in New Orleans, Louisiana. You walk in those places, those guys make you feel like a king. In the restaurant business, Danny Meyer is outstanding. Chick-fil-A is outstanding. In the hotel business, you've got the Bunkhouse group out of Texas that does St. Cecilia and the San Jose. They're very good. I mean, listen, one of the best was at one time was Ritz-Carlton when it was run by Horst Schulze. I mean, that company was fantastic. I can't recall the saying, so I may screw it up, but I think it was ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Horst said that he refers to, typically in a hotel in particular, you've got what a lot of people refer to as the back of the house. Well, I think I'm right in quoting him on this. He calls that the heart of the house. So, in a sense, the whole house doesn't work if the whole house is not working together with the same point of view about how we're going to take care of the guest. So, there's a lot of great people out there that do it well. There's, tiny places along the way. But as far as large companies, I think those four are really good examples.
What's your goal with the business?
To continue to grow it and really provide for the people that work for us, and to take care of the people that come to shop with us. And we, early on, Ann said to me, she said, Sid, you've got to be comfortable with this, because you may wind up as a single shingle shopkeeper. I said, okay, that's okay. If I can do what I do here, it's fantastic. And my greatest days, honestly, Glenn, I don't get as much time to spend on the floor, but in the first 5 years, I was on the floor 6 days a week, and our office was in the back of the store. It is so gratifying to run into people and to take care of them, and it's hard, but it was super, super fun. And so I'm in the store not nearly as much as I used to be, but how do we continue to build a group of people that love to take care of people and go to cities where people are asking us to come? Like right now, our number one e-commerce city is New York, funny enough. And we opened up in L.A. back in October. Our L.A. store was number 3 online. These are two, big media markets that we didn't have any physical presence in, yet they were our number 1 and number 3 online markets in the whole company. So we think that there's a lot of shop opportunities in the country where we can go to, but essentially wherever there's a professional football or a professional sports team, except for Oakland or Green Bay, we probably can go there.
But is there an overarching goal? Is there a revenue threshold you want to hit, a number of stores you want to hit? I mean, being named the top or one of the top men's warehouse stores in the country is a pretty big accolade. So something's got to be driving you to decide how many do you open and where you're trying to go. What's the roadmap look like?
It's a little more organic than that. We're taking it one day at a time and seeing where the opportunity leads us. And it's, at a certain point we may say, we've got 12 stores around the country, and they're doing fantastic, and we're providing for these customers, and we're taking care of the people that work for us. It's great. But we also may at some point go, let's continue going, because more people are asking for it. We may wind up with 75 stores. Everybody here likes a scoreboard, and we want to win. We want to be the best. And that's what we said as our goal is how do we be the best shop in the world?
So it's really quality over quantity, if you will, that's driving this.
For sure. And we spend a lot of time on getting the right people to come work with us, because it's not your typical retail job, Glenn. It's hard. and but it's also super gratifying because you're interacting with the customer on another level, really trying to become their in-house concierge in a sense. So if you came in this afternoon and said, hey, I've got an interview tomorrow, and we're like, well, what are you going to wear? And you're like, well, I don't know. Glenn, what do you got at home? Well, I got a gray and a blue suit. Okay, bring those in first. We'll get you in the tailor shop immediately, and then we'll ascertain. We're not trying to upsell you. We're trying to take care of what you currently got. Also, it may be easier to fix what you have. So we say, bring those in. Let's build around that as quickly as possible. It may just be, shortening the pants, tightening the waist up on the jacket, or letting the waist out. It could be just a minor change that we can do in the tailor shop. And then, by the way, Glenn, do you want us to bring it to your house tonight, or do you want to swing back by here, or you want us to meet you at the airport on your way to the interview? You tell us. And another goal we have is how do we give the customer economy of mind? And the way we give him, of mind, time, and money. And the way we give him mind is we've edited the world. Okay? I only have 2 brands of shirts in the store, my brand and a brand called Finamore. I used to only have 2 brands of jeans, but now I've got 3 because we added our own brand. Okay? But you don't have 6 pairs of jeans to edit from. You don't have 4 or 5 brands of shirts to edit from. We give you a very particular point of view. If you don't like the point of view, that's one thing. But if you appreciate the point of view, you're going to find everything you have or need right here. So economy of mind is we've edited. The economy of time is we want to get you in and out as quickly as possible. Some guys like to think of it as their third place. Some guys just want to get some pants and get the heck out of there because they got better things to do. They either want to spend time with their kids, they got to get back to work, they want to go play golf, they want to go on a trip, whatever they want to do. And then finally, economy of money, because we're a quasi-vertical company. So this suit that I've got on here, I've sourced the fabric, I've sourced the inner linings, I've sourced the trim, the felt undercollar, the lining for the jacket, and we've even personally built the canvases ourselves. So we go to the canvas factory, which the canvas is essentially the exoskeleton for the jacket. We go to the factory that builds those canvases, and we put together our own special canvas that nobody else has. We like to control the ingredients that go into our product, but then we don't wholesale it, so we bring it directly to the customer. So you basically have a direct selling relationship. Not unlike, Ann doesn't love it when I compare, but it's not unlike Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is a pretty good company where you get high quality product because it's vertical at a great price.
Love Trader Joe's.
Oh my goodness.
It's my favorite place. I could move into Trader Joe's.
I could too.
I'm going to talk about daily habits. How do you start your day? How do you end your day?
I start the day out by waking up and going, what is today? Where am I? And then I will find time to pray and to read, and I do that with Ann. And then I will have a cup of coffee and some eggs that Ann's prepared for me, and I hit the road. And I come to work.
So no working out in the morning, no meditation, nothing to get yourself physically or mentally ready.
Just the prayer and the reading, and I'll do push-ups. That's it. Okay. So, and that's probably the thing that's most lacking in my daily regimen is some exercise, because as I said, I grew up an athlete playing basketball, football, running track. I love sports. So I'm missing that piece, and that's something that needs to get back on my regimen.
Let's talk about work-life balance. I'm curious how you define it, and it sounds like already that there are some things you wish you could incorporate more. You're not just an entrepreneur, but you're a retail entrepreneur. And as anyone knows, this is not a Monday through Friday type of thing. This is constant, probably as much or more work weekends and sometimes evenings as you have during typical business hours. So how do you define work-life balance, and how do you achieve whatever you can achieve, and where do you aspire to improve where maybe you're lacking?
I would say that's probably one of my weaknesses is work-life balance. But the nice thing is we've always said that we're going to be closed one day a week. And in Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Washington, that means we're closed on Sundays.
Like Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. And then in Los Angeles, we're closed on Mondays because that's the lightest day in the shopping center. Sunday's a very busy day. So we want to be respectful to our real estate partners, but at the same time, we want them to be respectful for us to understand that we want one day off for everybody, because it's also a nice, for me, it's a nice message to the customer that we're not after every last dollar. Also, that we've got to rest a day. You got to sharpen your axe. There's some enforcement about my work-life balance based off of just when we're open and when we're not open. Outside of that, I've got to put exercise back at the forefront, because I'm 55 years old. I'm not getting younger. I'm in decent shape, but not very good shape. So I've got to change that. And I'd say the only other thing is how do I, the way I try to organize life is God, others, myself. If I put God first and then others next, and then find time for me, I'm okay. Unfortunately, my family kind of falls in the yourself category too often, because I consider them mine. So I've got to, really, find time to give back to them. And so we're a very close family. Like I said, everybody's living at home right now, and we've got girls from 16 to 26.
That's a business in itself.
That is a business in itself. But the other thing is my avocation is my vocation. Okay, so I'm not a guy who wants to go out and play golf. I like to squeeze in some tennis, or some basketball or football. But I'm not going to spend a whole day going to play golf. And that's not a slight against guys that do that. I wish I could sometimes, but really, I love doing what I do. So it's either being here or being with my family where I spend most of my time.
So you look back over all these successes you've had, who would you say has been the greatest influence in your life?
God and Ann, and then my parents.
Any regrets?
Yeah, I think probably sometimes working too much. It really can. Because I love it so much, it can become a mistress in itself. And I'm not in an extreme way, but in a way where it really, you go, let me dial this back a little bit. And it's a little bit of it's just self-control, Glenn. I mean, it's just like, I'm just going to, because the work will be here tomorrow. Okay? Sometimes it's just like, let me put my pen down, put my tape measure down, and go home.
I mean, the reality is fulfilling work can be an addiction, both in the positive sense and in the negative sense.
No question.
Too far.
No question.
So if the Sid Mashburn of today could hop in the proverbial time machine, go back 30 some odd years, and give the recently graduated 20-something Sid some advice, what would it be?
Listen more. It's like the old saying, you have two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you talk. And I probably would have respected and loved on the people that were my mentors a little bit more. That's probably another regret in a way, is really not letting people understand what a influence they had on my life along the way. Going back to Pee-wee football coaches, to school teachers, to friends, to just people along the way that have been an influence on my life. I've been very, very, very fortunate to have met some awesome people.
What do you say to someone, they're in their 30s, their 40s, they've got their thriving career, they're doing well financially, they've got a family, but they're not hitting on all cylinders because there's something missing. They have a burning desire to start something, to do something, but can't get over the fear, the risk that entails, the possibility of losing money, of possibly hurting their pride, their dignity. You did it, and you've overcome the obstacles, and now you've got, knock on wood, a thriving business that keeps growing. What do you say to that person that can't get over that hump?
One of the fortunate things about my path to getting here is that every decision I ever made was informed by seeking the counsel of others, in particular my wife. And it was super important. And also friends that would say, Sid, that's crazy, don't do that, or Sid, yes, do that. And that doesn't mean I followed their advice, but Ann's advice I always had to follow. Not that I had to, but I needed to for us and for the nature of our relationship. If your wife has said okay, or if your husband has said okay, and your heart tells you it's okay, and you've done the due diligence to understand that there's an opportunity there, I'd say you got to push through. Because if you don't push through, you'll have regret. And as I'm sure you know, Glenn, is that the currency of encouragement spends longer than the cash. You've got to have that encouragement along the way.
We'll end on that note. Sid, this has been incredibly informative. You're an inspiration, very successful in all walks of life. Thanks so much for being part of this.
Thank you, Glenn.
Enjoyed it.
Much. Okay.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.